I've been in the legal operations space since probably 2008, and have done many CLM implementations, in all the gamut of the legal operations space. I look forward to having this discussion, especially on post implementation of CLM, as we're really involved in that space right now, as we do have a post implementation of CLM. Turn over to Diane.
Actually, Patty, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. My name is Patricia Callejon, but everyone calls me Patty. Please feel free to do so. I'm a director of CLM solutions and strategy at Integreon. I'm a lawyer by training, and I began my career working at global law firms. I guess in there was my first encounter with poor contract management experience, and I was, I guess, a victim of a poor CLM and contract management experience. After that, I did a change and moved to a software company, a CLM software company, where I did a lot of CLM implementations. I got a few scars in CLM implementation in there. And after several years doing CLM implementation at the software company, I decided to do another change and move to Integreon to the professional services side and help with the post-implementation support for CLM systems. Diane?
Thanks, Patty. Diane Homolak. I am the Vice President for Technology Solutions at Integreon. And I come from a 30-year in-house career at Hewlett-Packard. I managed the U.S. Contracting function, buy side and sell side, including the federal business. I also then moved into a role that was leading their business enabling team, which was the global strategy and innovation office for the legal department. So that really was deploying all of the technology and process changes and solutions that would support the business through all of its stages. And if you're familiar at all with HP, it went through a tremendous amount of change. We saw massive acquisitions and then divestitures, and so a lot of things to tackle with respect to technology and how to deploy it. I've spent the last 6 years in the legal service providers business, and really am enjoying being able to find the solutions to so many of the things that we suffered with as an in-house team. So I'm really happy to talk to you today, Colin, about this topic. I would like to spend just a moment and introduce Integreon if I can. Integreon is an alternative legal service provider. We have 20 years in this business. Our top 25 clients have over 12 years experience with us. So we tend to have long-term successful relationships. We're not in and gone. We are in and stay because people are happy using us. We provide everything from managed doc review to immigration services support, subpoena and law enforcement compliance, graphic design and business research. We also provide cyber incident response, abstraction and remediation project work, contract administration, review and negotiation for managed services, and most recently, as Patty was describing, CLM platform support. So I know that's the last topic, but we are a provider of many, many services. We deliver follow the sun capability through 3 ISO service certified delivery centers spread across 3 continents. And our team is made up primarily of practitioners that have come over to this space. So we're not just people that provide services, we're people that have done this work in both sides of the equation.
So first of all, Diana, I just want to jump in, and I love that you kind of talked about like everything that you do, because some people see that a little different, right? But how I see it, we love to see the value of exactly what you do. And for folks in legal operations, we just don't know. So I'm delighted you kind of spell that out. So when we know what when we look at Integreon, we know exactly what you do. Appreciate you doing that. So I'm going to jump in with the first question, and I'm going to frame it a little differently. So it's like all these shiny objects out there, CLM systems that everybody's been talking about nonstop, right? Somebody picks their CLM, right? But what they don't realize, they think they're buying a Ferrari, but they also get a mechanic sitting in the back, right? That comes around to fix the Ferrari when it breaks down sometimes. So given all that is spent on implementation of CLM tools, are they living up to their potential in returning the value they promise for all our organizations?
I'm going to take that one, if it's okay. And I have a couple of comments on that. The first one is, I don't think post-implementation support is just about being a mechanic fixing a machine. It's actually the opposite. You don't want to get to that point. The post-implementation support should be seen so that you actually don't have those issues, and you actually from day one can see the benefits and the value of using these technologies, right? So I guess I wanted to clarify that for us, post-implementation support is actually before you need the mechanic, it's before you have the issues, right? And then back to your question about living to their potential, I think there's still a lot to do in the sense that the adoption rates for these technologies remain very low. On average and across industry, the adoption rate for CLM is 21%. The only feature that is above 50% is the contract repository. So there is a lot of money being spent, a lot of effort, a lot of time in implementing these tools, and they have a lot of potential and a lot of good functionality. But the fact that organizations are only using this for contract repository, then, you know, it tells you that they are not living to their potential, right? And it's not only about the promises that these vendors are making, it's also about the responsibility of organizations to put the processes and the teams and the support in place so that you can have these machines and these technologies, you know, going. And you have to put the effort. After you are paying and investing in these tools and you're implementing, you cannot underestimate the management and the maintenance that these tools require so you can see the benefits. So, you know, other features like document assembly and request management have like 20% of adoption, but then the, you know, good features like contract analytics or extraction of obligations that can really give you good information about your contracts, about your business, how to move forward, how to improve things, are not being utilized because companies don't have the expertise, the knowledge, the time to actually, dedicate and learn how to use some of these features. So again, I think there is still a lot to do because there is a lot of money and effort and time just to use these technologies as contract repository when they have so many other functionalities that can give you so many good information and so many good data about your business and your operations, and help you to really, streamline these processes and evolve, I guess, as a company.
Yeah, appreciate that, Patricia. Thanks for coming right back at me with that one. So then the next question to follow up on that is like, why is post-implementation support so critical for companies that have invested in the CLM?
For me, and I'm going to try this one, Patty. For me, to invest in a CLM, it's a big investment. These are not inexpensive systems for the most part. Yeah, there are some lesser costs for smaller organizations, but at an enterprise level, this is an investment. It's an investment of time for your teams to deploy them initially. There's been a lot of ROI work done, I'm sure, to get the funding justified up front. And there's a lot of visibility against these deployments. So now you have a system that everybody's looking at saying it's going to solve the world. But people are putting it out there and they get just so far with it. Like Patty said, they get as far as putting everything in as a repository, and then it doesn't take the next step. It doesn't get you to that. What do I do to make my organization different because of the information I can get out of it? What am I doing to make my team more productive because I'm using the system in a seamless way and in an effective way? Those opportunities are being lost to really produce the ROI. And yet you have all this visibility of, why did we put this in if I still can't find my contracts, if I'm still taking forever to turn around, if the business doesn't find they're getting it soon enough? You have to be able to answer those driving questions that made you pick the system to begin with. And so often those questions are being lost. They are not being fruitfully realized in the deployments. So you have people that are disappointed in the outcomes.
Perfect. So before we answer Angela's question, because I think we can answer this on the fly before we go to the next part, right? I'm just going to jump in with one more question. What are the potential risks or pitfalls associated with inadequate post-implementation support of a CLM system?
So I guess I'll start by saying that, again, these are not plug and play tools. You have to manage them. You have to maintain them. The major or the biggest risk that I see, first of all, is low adoption, as I was saying, and talking about the rates. And it's very easy to get your users frustrated with the tool, and it's hard to then change them to then start realizing the benefits of using the tool once they are frustrated. So if you don't have the right support for your users in terms of training, help desk support, and workflow maintenance, then they're going to get frustrated, and it's going to be hard to bring them back to see the benefits of the tool. Another risk is around workflow efficiency. The technology is going to be an enabler, but it's that perception that it's going to automatically fix and do everything by itself is a mistake. You still have to need the support, and it's going to be fine if you still need some support to then streamline some of these processes, to route some notifications, approvals, to make sure that they are not in a loop or stuck in some steps of the processes, or even to see that they are getting stuck, and then how you can actually help to then making some tweaks, or to again, support your users to keep moving the process along. Another one will be compliance. If you are not sure that you're extracting the crucial data from your contracts, an example could be you're missing key terms, or, for example, expiry dates, then it's really easy to get in a position where you're not compliant with some of your contract obligations, right? Another one could be the lack of continuous improvement. If you're not really supporting your post-implementation and your system, then it's very likely, since your organization that probably is going to be evolving and your business needs are going to change, that your initial implementation is going to be, it's going to be left behind. And if you're not monitoring and supporting that, then your system and your solution is going to be outdated, and it's not going to be aligned with your business needs and the evolution of your company. So that's another risk of not having that support and that monitoring and maintenance of your CLM.
That's perfect. Just to segue into Angela's question, I'd love your thoughts on that. And I know you kind of were touching on it there. Is it the product not living up to its potential, or is it the company culture that is refusing to change? I think any good implementation has to consider the company culture to succeed. Love your thoughts on that.
I absolutely agree that the company culture has to be considered. There's no question. There's nothing worse than picking a tool for a particular feature that culturally is never going to get adopted in your system. So maybe you have a tool where you're expecting people to check a document in and check it back out, and then check it back in and then check it back out. And your lawyers are just absolutely never going to go through those steps. It's not going to happen. You have to make those alignments up front, and you have to look at what is feasible, what of the capabilities of that tool are my people really going to adopt? Is it going to be embraced in the way it operates? And sometimes it's the tool. There are easier ways to do some of that. And if you find a tool that says, gee, that's easy enough that people will adopt it, whereas this other tool, that's going to be too difficult, and so I shouldn't pick that one. So yes, there's a place where culture can be applied up front. But I don't think culture should be a fallback for why you don't have support, because a lot of times people come in with a lot of enthusiasm to launch the new system. We've got the new tool, we're all going to use it. And then they get in there, and the first time they try it, they run into a problem, and there's nobody to help them. They hit a button and they get an unexpected result, and there's nobody that can tell them why. They try something and it's more complicated than they expect, and they don't have a training cheat sheet that they can work from to figure out how they did it. Or they went in and tried it the first time, and then it was 2 weeks because they went on vacation, and they came back and they haven't tried it in a while. You have to be able to have that as a living support for people. People aren't in the tool every minute of every day. I mean, organizations like ours are. When we're supporting you as a service provider for a managed service, we live and breathe in that tool all day long. So my teams don't have those issues because they're there all the time. But for most in-house teams, they're in and out of the tool. and they don't remember from time to time, what did I do the last time I did this? So having structure and support that's post-implementation that helps your teams with that kind of adoption challenge, it helps them maintain their enthusiasm. The other mistake people make culturally is that they expect their in-house teams to be able to be the knowledge leaders. They put that burden on these people to have to do that on top of their day job. And they're not technologists. This is hard. And so now they start to say, oh, I don't really want to have to learn this too. I'm just going to do it old style and I'll bring the document in later. Then they forget, and then it's still in someone's drawer and it hasn't been loaded in. And you've got all your old habits being employed in a brand new tool. So having that structure around what you need them to do from a process perspective is really important. And that's the post deployment. That day 1, everybody's happy. Day 2, day 12, day 20, are they still as happy? Are they struggling? Do you have things in place to help them keep that momentum? That's really where I see the cultural thing is missing.
I got a follow-up question on that, if that's okay,
Yeah.
Colin. First of all, great question on the culture and the change management strategy portion. I mean, a lot of times we overlook that at first, and we forget how important it is in a large, especially in a large organization, to think about the change management strategy. My question is, why is additional post-implementation support necessary, considering that you already was provided some professional services from the team, your CLM implementation team?
So usually what organizations find is that they get disappointed on 2 fronts. They're expecting their own internal IT organization to handle things, or they're expecting the vendor to handle things. And there's 2 places where both of those organizations are not going to be able to handle it and shouldn't be expected to. Take your own IT organization first. Your own IT organization is aimed at your enterprise deployments. They're looking at your Active Directory. They're looking at your whole Outlook deployment and how it supports your world, your Microsoft Office 365 world, or whatever it is that you're running in. They're looking at enterprise level operations and making sure people can get in and out and that the thing is running and it's up. And if you aren't one of those categories of issues, they are not staffed to support you. Most internal IT departments don't handle first line support for departmental applications. And a CLM is a departmental application. Nobody else is using it but your procurement, your legal, and your business teams that have to go into it to help get something out. It's not enterprise kind of software that's running your world. So your IT department is not equipped to handle questions that are at the user level, where you have a user that can't operate the process. They hit the wrong button. They don't know what happened when it did this. They've got questions on why you're doing it this way. They don't know how the data is structured. They can't answer that. They're not living and breathing in your department. So that first level support falls to you. Then the other piece of it is the vendor. The vendor is good at, is something in my tool not working right? Is it broken? But they need you to filter. They can't get every question coming from every one of your users. From personal experience and our statistics, 80% or more of the questions that come in on a new systems operation are user error, user confusion, user training inadequacy. They're all based on the process and not on the tool. It is the rare item where the tool actually broke. And so the vendor needs you to sort through and bring them the broken things, but you don't have time for that. So you're gathering questions of, well, Mary tried this and it didn't work. Well, the vendor doesn't know what to do with that. They can't diagnose that. They need someone to come in and say, I've replicated this problem. It's button X. It's supposed to do Y and it's not doing Y. Then they'll go in, bug fix that and help you. But you need to be able to take it down to that level for them. They are second level support, not first level. And it's that first level support that most CLMs completely lack once they've been deployed. They don't have anyone to do it. And so that's where we think there's a big gap in making these things successful.
Yeah, can I add something to that?
Patty.
You mentioned something really important, Diane, is your vendor is also going to prioritize real incidents with the tool, the technical incidents. Mm-hmm. And you want them to do that because you actually need them for fixing that. So it's very common for a help desk support from the vendor perspective to label the priority of those tickets. And if it's a question or a training issue, they're not going to prioritize that ticket. They're going to prioritize the tickets that are related to technical issues and to incidents, right? So your user is going to have to wait in line for an answer, and he's going to get frustrated, and he wants their contract to be done, right? They want a fast answer so they can move forward with their day. So you handling, or your post-implementation support team handling those questions is going to allow them to have quick answers, and your team or your post-implementation team is going to prioritize those tickets, and it's going to escalate to the vendors, the ones that are really incidents and they actually have to fix. So it's also, prioritizing and helping your users to get fast answers so they can actually move forward and not get frustrated with the tool, and just escalating to the vendor the ones that they have to fix and the ones that they need to take care of. And I just want to add, based on my perspective, I just shared that I used to work at a software company, and I was leading the implementation team, not the support team. But it felt like an account was never over with the implementation, because we kept receiving tickets and questions about the usage because they didn't have internal teams that could help with that support and answering those questions. So you keep relying on the vendor, and the vendor at the end is going to, they have to cut the implementation process and move you to the support, right? So they're going to move you to a help desk support that is going to be focused on incidents and not in actually resolving questions or trainings from your users. So you have to think about the different type of support that you're looking for your users, and assign those correctly.
And I thought you mentioned something really important there. A lot of these questions are real-time issues for people. They are in the middle of a negotiation. They are trying to get a document edited, and they're stuck. And they can't get in queue with a vendor or put a ticket into a help desk team that's going to get to them the next day or the day after, because you're now a level 12 priority. They need somebody who can help them right away so that they can get that thing done. And if they can't fix it in the tool, they're moving out. They've just moved out to plan B because they can't wait. Real world work needs to continue on being done, and they can't wait for the tool answer to come through. So you have to have a way of filling that gap.
Yep, makes sense. And no quicker way to lose support than to have somebody's question not answered within within a day at least. Have a good turnaround time on the answer.
Right.
With that, I got a follow-up question, Colin. What are some best practices for managing the relationship with the CLM vendor and effectively utilizing their supported resources? You kind of mentioned some in your response right now, but what are some best practices you can think of managing that relationship?
So I think best practices involve having someone that's going to intercept the questions and the issues that are coming in from your team, and turning them and deciding, is this something that has to go to the vendor, or do I need to get them an answer from our organization? Because the sorting between those two is going to reduce your tickets to your vendor by an order of magnitude. And then your vendor tickets, then once they're done and sorted and prioritized, you can also give them to the vendor and say, look, this one's really impactful. This one, I'd love to see the drop-down list updated for this extra item, but I don't need that tomorrow. But button A is not working. I gotta have that one. So you can also help your vendor prioritize and focus. And I think a best practice is to have someone that's going to intercept those issues. But it's hard because your own teams, you're going to have to appoint someone to really be in that focal point role and be that sort of traffic cop for what's coming in. But I don't think there's any other way of doing it. And the same thing is true even for your own IT teams. You need to be able to know when to direct someone to IT, because it's their Active Directory that's keeping them from getting in the tool, versus it's something that they're doing wrong in their login process. So that to me is a huge best practice for managing your relationships with your vendors and your resources.
Perfect.
I also think that having good training materials and cheat sheets is important. You'll cut down your questions if you've got something someone can relate to. I know it's old school, but we literally used to laminate cheat sheets, because it's like, I just need a 1 page, and I do mean 1 page, because people won't look up and do 3 pages worth of stuff. But if you can go step 1, step 2, and it's got a little picture, you're all good.
So I just want to kind of close the loop in the chat with Colleen's question as well. She says, do you need to identify like CLM champions within your legal team with change management? Is that part of your kind of built-in process with post-implementation?
I think
Yes.
that's an important thing to do, but don't overburden your champions or you're going to burn them out. So there are people that have natural inclination for these things. They're good at it. They're interested in it. They want to be a champion. They want to help their fellow coworkers with things. But if you turn it into 50% of their job, you're gonna be defeating that purpose. So you have to know that you have a champion who's can speak and talk to the team as one of their own, but you can't overuse them. If you do, then you're going to defeat the champion. Nobody's going to raise their hand.
And to complement to the strategy of having champions, I think it's important that to anyone that you're giving training, explaining how that is going to be beneficial for them. It's very common also that you provide training and you talk about the great things about the tool, but you're not really focusing that training on that specific group or role of that person in the company and how that is really going to make their jobs easier. So besides or in addition to having champions, actually explaining to the user how that is going to affect them in a good way is going to convert that person a champion and a sponsor of the tool instantly, right? But you have to talk specifically to that person and what that person is going to be doing on the tool. You cannot say that this tool is great and all the general benefits of the tool and not specifically explaining to that person how the training that you're providing to them in that specific session, in that specific cheat sheet, or in whatever other method of training that you use is important to them and what they have to do in their day-to-day jobs.
Not to belabor this too much, but I think it's a kind of an important topic because we've all said in there, right? But in these like CLM processes and implementations and integrations, there's a lot of scale happening. And then we've heard things about, I'd love to get your point on a train-the-trainer approach. Have you guys seen that, and has that been effective?
Train the trainer is it's a great method if you have someone that you can start out at being at the top of that food chain. So you have someone that's really spent time with the vendor and understood it, and then you can bring it in-house and take it down to department leads or champions within groups and make them the next level of the train the trainer. So yes, it definitely works to get that level of experience from the vendor to be trained, but you also need someone who's you're going to invest in the understanding of the processes. So it's not just understanding the tech. They have to understand how all those processes weave in and out. So you may need individual department process leads that know it. Depends on how complicated or how elaborate your CLM deployment is and how many different groups are represented. But train the trainer works for the tech piece alone.
Got it. So following up on that then, like what are some of the key considerations for organizations when approaching the post-implementation phase for the CLM system?
Consider whether it's worth doing this yourself or whether you could get a lower cost resource that can manage this for you. And I obviously I'm invested in what our services provide, and I'm not ashamed of that because I think we bring a value proposition. But your resources are there for other purposes. They're there for a greater, higher value, and it's great to have them have an investment or be a champion of the particular tech, but you don't want that to become their day job unless you've truly just hired a team of people that are going to go do this. And I would say we might be able to do that more effectively for you than to put in place a team of your own that has going to support that. So look at the use of your resources. Is that their best and highest purpose? Because it may not be. And while champions are great, that shouldn't become their day job. And too often it does. It becomes their day job.
Yeah, I think, like, just my experience is like you need an expert help, and it's just, everyone can't be an expert all the time at everything, right? So it's a big heavy lift to bring in one system, never mind many systems in your legal operations roles. Following up on that, the dreaded question around change, right? It's like, how can organizations effectively address resistance to change and foster a positive mindset towards the CLM system during post-implementation phase?
So I have two soapbox items on the idea of change management. One of them is I think organizations vastly underutilize the role of the first line manager. And the reason I say that is because everybody focuses on the individual user, and those managers are just supposed to know and manage the people, but there's nothing focused on them as to what their role in the tool is, how they're going to help their teams. And they don't want it as their day job to become the champion. So don't mistake your first line managers for your champions, because that's not the same thing. But you do want those managers to understand what's the mission here. Back to those main questions. What are you trying to get out of this tool? What is their focus? And then make sure that those managers are helping you to help the teams see the value and understand it. There's nothing worse than having a whole group of users that are all in the tool, they're using it, they're struggling, but they're getting everything in, and they meet with their manager, and their manager doesn't even know how to log in. Their manager doesn't look at anything that's in the tool. Their manager isn't they ask them, how's the work going? Well, I've got my dashboard, and you could look in there and see it. Oh, well, just tell me how you're doing. Okay, the manager should be going into that tool and saying, I see you have 3 transactions. I see this one took longer than the others. Are you struggling? What did you do with it? Show that you're using the tool for what it's there for. But your first line managers have to do that. If they're not invested, the teams rapidly realize nobody cares. Oh, well, nobody really cares if I'm using it. My manager doesn't even know if I'm in. So managers should be going in and saying, I noticed you haven't logged in the tool in 2 days. What are you doing? How are you getting your work done? I mean, those are the kinds of questions, not in a nasty way, in a nice way, but they should be having that kind of dialogue with their teams. So first line manager support, huge. The other big area is reporting. Reporting is extremely powerful, but we tend to make reports for executives, and executives look at them once a month. These systems have data that's rich for the use of everyday teams. Pull your reports for people to use every single day. Tell the person that, gee, the first thing they see on their morning dashboard is that they have 3 items they haven't touched in 20 days. That's not okay. That should be flagging to them. Time to touch, time to touch, time to touch. Whatever it is you want and prioritize, you're going to have to report out on it, but you have to start with the group that's using it. Give them something useful in reporting, and then roll that information up. Make sure the managers are covering those reports with them, and then that information flows up to your executives. Too often, executive reports are created, and everybody down below has no idea what's even being measured. They're never told. That's the biggest other sin. So first line manager, report sharing.
What metrics
reaches you?
Or what metrics or measurements can be used to assess the effectiveness of a post implementation support for CLM? Because you mentioned dashboards, you mentioned reports. Do you have any specific examples, or what type of metrics or measurements can be used, to sort of look at that effectiveness?
Patty, I know you're passionate about metrics. I'm going to let you take this.
Sure. So the first one is going to be around adoption, right, and usage. Okay. So also monitoring and checking who is using the tool. Now, you have to be careful with this one, because you might have a total population of users that you have permission in your system, but that doesn't mean that all of them, are going to be constantly using the tool. You also have to understand what's the role of these different groups of users and what's the frequency that they should be using the tool. Because if you only have a manager that is going to be, extracting a report every other month, then you cannot then use that user saying like, oh, this person hasn't logged in a week. We have low usage. So you have to really understand your population of users and how they're going to be using the tool, and measuring which ones are, logging into the system and using the system as expected based on their role and, the tasks that they have to do on the CLM. Another one is cycle times. So these tools have great dashboards and reports to measure the average time that you spend on the different tasks of the life cycle of the contract. How much time you spend, managing requests or creating a contract, negotiating a contract, or even executing the contract. So using these cycle times to understand maybe where you have bottlenecks and where you can make tweaks, or actually using that information to review the process, or even some of the configurations that you have on the CLM, is also another way of tracking and measuring the adoption and the effectiveness of your system. insights, contract analytics. So it's also super helpful to understand the compliance, right? So how many of your contracts are actually deviated from your policies and your standard terms? Now, if you are actually generating and negotiating and executing the contracts in the system, you have the information to compare these to your standards and to your policies, and then evaluate if there are any risks associated with those contracts, because again, they are deviations from your standards. So, and this, I want to mention something that I missed when I was talking about the adoption of these tools. The importance of users using these tools, along the way of the process, is not only that you're spending money and you want your users to use the tool that you're already paying, but it's also that these tools rely very heavily on the consistent and widespread usage in order to be effective. If you have all these functionalities, but you do not have your process or your users using the tool for the life cycle of the contract, you're gonna miss pieces of the story that are going to tell you relevant information so that you can then action on this data. So it's very key that your users are not only using the tool because of the money that you're spending and the investment, but also because it's going to give you the information that then it's going to allow you to action, and it's going to allow you to actually understand how your business is doing.
Very good. And one last question from me, Colin. How does post-implementation support contribute to maximizing the benefit and optimizing that investment in CLM solutions? And ultimately, how does it assure success?
Well, this goes back to what I was saying, right? So if you are able to see all this data and all these processes and the performance, you're going to be able to action on this. So if you identify bottlenecks or you identify, specific steps of the process that you have to improve, you can then make those changes, and then you can fix those and close deals faster, for example, right? And you're going to be able to recognize revenue even sooner than expected, or you're going to be able to create contracts and onboard vendors faster as well. So being able to utilize these functionalities and all these data is going to allow you to make changes that are going to impact on your business, right? So again, utilizing these for improving is not only about making a better contract management process, it's about making your business better, because you're going to be able to action on this, and then you're going to have instant benefits associated to these changes.
Thank you.
So my follow-up then is, what advice would you give to organizations embarking on the post-implementation phase of their CLM journey?
I would say stress the importance of what you're doing with post-implementation support. It's not just because you want to make it nice. It's assuring your return on investment. You have just spent a boatload of money in licensing. You have just spent a boatload of money in training and time and investment to pick this out. You have spent a boatload of money with somebody to help do the implementation configurations and all. If you just then sit back and think you built a statue and it's going to look beautiful for the next 1,000 years, you're wrong. You built a robot, probably an android. It's going to need care and feeding and all kinds of things in order to keep it running. And if you don't acknowledge that right from the beginning, you're going to get behind the 8 ball pretty quickly. A lot of people think, oh, well, it'll be okay. It'll settle down after time. Not necessarily. And I think what we have to remember is, when you don't want to be in a position where 2 years from now, you're trying to pick out another CLM because you're blaming it on features that didn't work. I promise you, every CLM out there has exactly the same set of features. I mean, give or take a little bit of how they operate them, they are all very, very similar in the range of things they can do. And they're all introducing the same new things in the next iterations. So you don't need a whole new vendor. You need to be able to use the vendor you have, and it's a lot less expensive than starting over. So making sure you're making that investment from the beginning so you don't dig yourself a hole you can't get out of, because that's what happens. You dig yourself a hole that you can't get out of. So understanding that value proposition right from the beginning is I think the acknowledgement that has to be made.
Perfect. But Patty, anything to add to that one?
No, I think Diane covered that really well. Yeah, nothing to add right now. I guess back to what I initially said, that don't think about this once you already have the issue. That's going to be too late to then incorporate the post-implementation support. And I think it relates to the title of the webinar, right? Is people thinking that once they select the right vendor and once they're done with the implementation, it's going to magically, work out and automatically everything is going to be solved, when the technology is an enabler. And even though it sounds very repetitive, it's about process, people, and technology. It's an entire platform that has to work together in order to function and to really, give you the benefits. And as Diane mentioned, I think right now you see companies with lacking confidence on some of these systems and thinking that it's a product issue, a vendor issue. And I'm not saying that, one is going to fit all, but it's very likely that the one that you already have can work. Maybe what you have to, review is if you have the right system and support in place to make that work for your organization.
Yeah, sorry, Diane.
I was just going to say, people think that somehow some magical feature is going to solve their problem. Features don't produce results. It's the use of features that produces results. And that's where people miss that. They miss that piece. They think that I've deployed the feature, magic happens. It's the usage of features that happens. And magic doesn't exist.
So today there's a lot of magic happening. So,
yeah.
So
Yes.
So I would say you guys are magic. This is some incredible information. Before I jump into my final question, I'm going to play a little bit of a game, like a bit of a workshop. But I wanted to look at just answer kind of Colleen's question. Is it better to push for a slow rollout with users coming on board in groups, or larger rollout where you can address change management and training more quickly and identifying any issues more quickly?
I think that's purely a cultural question. When I was working at HP, as large as it was, and it was a massive legal department, thousands of lawyers spread across 82 countries, tens of thousands of agreements a month, we did big bang. We went everywhere all at once. Now, we didn't do that with every feature on day one, but we took a core small group of features and gave it to everybody. And we did that because culturally, if we had waited and staged and brought regions on and all of that, or business units, those folks don't wait. And so they would have gone off and created their own little solutions all the while where they were waiting in queue to get in on the main system. It's much harder to bring in when they've already gone off and found something they like, because now they say, well, you know what, I really like mine better. I'm not joining yours now. And depending on your organization, they may have a little bit of opt-out capability, or at least can add a lot of FUD to the process because they've now got something that's challenging your model. So it was culturally important for us to go big bang. And we did for that reason. For other organizations, it's better for them to go and take it business unit by business unit. I would strongly recommend that you do it with a really premier group first. Don't go too corner case, because you don't get the credibility of start. If a big guy starts, the little guys are like, I guess I need to do this too. If you start with a little one, the big guys, it's not like me. So be careful of who you choose as your pioneers, and make sure that rollout plan is tight and it's followed and everybody knows when they're going, and that you have that really well maintained, because that's where your structure goes for rollout time. Also, you can roll out more feature rich if you're going smaller. If you're going big, contain your feature set and then roll out feature by feature over time, but get everybody employed. So you can go either direction, but you have to know what you're doing when you're planning one or the other, because there are trade-offs and there's good and bad. There's no one answer.
Perfect. I'm just going to jump down to Daniel Gray 8. I think there's about 8 Daniel Grays in there, so somebody must have shared the same link. But whoever this person is, made a comment: having cross-functional team within the organizations help greatly with adoption and implementation. That's correct. Angela, so Angela, I'd like some more information on what you mean by many vendors required to choose your service plan. What do you mean? Can you just give us some more color around that? And then I'd like Diane and Patricia then to kind of weigh in on, how Angela sees this So she says, I find that many companies skimp on the cost. If there's not a dedicated internal person owning the platform, then you have to choose the highest level of support services, at least initially. If you have an internal person owning the platform, you can get away with the lower vendor support. But if that person leaves, you need to upgrade your service package immediately. Just like to get your kind of thoughts on that.
So I'm familiar with what she's referring to, and usually vendors have a tiered service package. Some of them have very bare bones packages where all they're going to do is fix bugs and things that are actually system is broken, button not working kind of issues. And then it goes up the line to include professional services for configuring your system, adding drop-down choices and lists and things like that. And then it can go all the way up to trying to learn your environment and provide first line support, though I will tell you, my own experience is that that's difficult for vendors to provide well, even if they're providing it at an enhanced level. They don't know your environment well enough to really be first line support. But the ones that are, you can go lower packages if you have your own people or a service provider that can effectively at a good price point do your configurations, alter your drop down choices, run your reports for you, configure new dashboards. Usually, if the tool has those capabilities, you need someone that knows how to pull all those levers. That does mean making someone their full-time job, or at least close to their full-time job, to learn all those pieces. That's where a service provider can help you. If you don't want to have invest in that or use your own valuable and more expensive resources to do it, service provider could do that.
Perfect. So I'm just going to tee this one up. And the question first goes to Jameson. So I'm bringing Jameson into the fray to answer a question. So somebody who's a VP of an organization, a big, large company that is currently going through like post implementation right now, I'd like you first to start identifying some of your challenges and what measures you've taken. And then I'd like Patty and Diane, or either one of you, to jump in and just say, at what point should he have known that he needed post-implementation support, and really kind of frame it up. And if anybody's any questions, lean on it. We got about 13 minutes left. I'd like to kind of get something on this. And Jameson, you want to tell us about your challenges?
So I'll start by saying that if I had a crystal ball when I first started CLM, I would have believed my team when they gave me a presentation on why we need the support person post-implementation. We didn't even start. We were probably 2 months into implementation, and one of the team members gave me a presentation on the exact setup post-implementation. We need a techie person. We need a person that does this, and that. And I was like, well, wait a minute. We haven't even implemented it yet. Why don't we just wait to implementation, and then we'll give a presentation later to when we need more budget to hire the position if we need that position. So in my mind, I wasn't thinking with the system administrator approach. I was thinking with let's one and done, right? The magical button, turn it on, everybody's happy, have a nice day. Now post-implementation, the key areas that I see, especially for adoption and usage from a change management perspective, has been touched on this call, right? It's making sure you have the right person in place to answer the questions. Make sure you identify the right sort of champions in each of the particular practice groups, like your senior paralegals, et cetera, that can sort of be the trainer type of thing. Make sure you do have the one single person in legal ops that is the expert that can answer those train the trainer hire questions quickly, because your trainer or your senior paralegal or your champion is only as good as how fast they can get that answer back to their practice areas. So we've done that, Colin, and another thing we've done is just making it as user-friendly as possible. And what I mean by that is, whether it's an X-Author edition on your Microsoft Word connected to your CLM system, if you have an issue there, it's not going to IT and waiting days to get that fixed. It's having sort of that white glove service to your attorneys especially when they're working on contracts, and contracts equal business, right? Equal revenue. So that's some of the things that we've done.
I think you've hit on the right things to be focused on. I would only say to you that as you look at the teams and the people you're putting in place to do those roles, is that the best and highest use of the people that are focusing on those activities? Is it starting to become their day job? Do you want it to be their day job? And then that's where a service provider is an option for you. because it is a cost-effective way of bringing in expertise that's going to be focused on those areas. And I know someone in the chat mentioned, if you lose a person that is your key person, core person, you're frozen until you either replace them and train them, or you you go to the vendor and on bended knee hoping they're going to keep you afloat. Having a service provider, we're responsible for making sure there's backup to our backup. So if we're providing you that service, we have to have someone that can step in if our person goes out or whatever. So it becomes our burden and not yours. But I think your team that took the time to outline for you where the needs were, that was proactive on their part. And they were smart to be able to do that. So many organizations don't look beyond, first days. Oh, well, I'm going to have office hours. Everybody will be great. And they'll all be able to call into office hours after the first 2 days. Okay. What happens on day 5? Office hours are no longer running. You need more than that. So it's nice to see that your organization was proactive. I applaud them for stepping up and saying the need was there.
So just a quick follow-up on that. You mentioned proactive like a couple of times, and I'm like, a lot of it is just reactive, right? It's like before they do even post implementation. Should that not be part of the strategy when you go out to procure any system, right?
I think there's so much.
Systems,
there's only so much you can do in the implementation phase. Yes, you can definitely design it with your culture in mind. You can make sure that it's as user-friendly as possible with as few failure points and touch integrations and things that have to go be chased and such as possible. You can make sure that it is well-trained and that your people have their information. But it only takes you to day one. And never underestimate the power of confused people to defeat a very intelligent system, because they will do it. And so you need to be able to support them and prepare for them. And there's more coming. We are around the corner from having every vendor out there introduce some sort of generative AI into these applications. Every one of us is going to be facing the need to understand how that is going to work, how people are going to be able to use it, what are your policies going to be around it, how am I going to keep it contained and up to date? Is it accurate in my world? Are people checking it right? Is there QC on the activities taking place? This is where having people that can help you with this is going to be important. And that's something we're leaning into heavily in our teams to make sure that we're on top of this technology, because we're going to run into it in every service provider environment that we support. We often run in our client environments, so we have to be prepared for all of those. And that's why we feel this kind of service as an extension is important. So
from my seat, from what I see from that comment is generative AI is going to turn from a nice to have to a need to have, right? It's like what I just said about, I wish I had a crystal ball that told me I needed to have this post implementation person, because it turned into not a nice to have, but a need to have. So it's almost like you have to put the two together now. And if you're going to hire somebody or spend the money on the internal resources from your budget, then that person needs to understand that their job may not just be fixing a template or updating a Salesforce template, right, et cetera, process improvement. Right. It's probably going to be becoming sort of a generative AI answer taker, right? Someone that can help that smart person that you mentioned that's going to try to mess up the system, right? To put some audits in place to make sure they don't pull the wrong information. So it's here, and it's scary at first for my type of, for any organization.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. It's almost
well, and what's I think even a little bit more unexpected with this application is that it's not going to be long before a lot of this they're literally click on plugins within your application. So your vendor is going to roll an update, and all of a sudden you're going to see a new button that says "Ask so and so." Well, that's Gen AI, guys. That's what that button's doing. And you better know and recognize it, because people are going to go, "What does this button do?" And
it's like knowledge management on steroids, where you can get information in a click, right?
Running.
It's just like,
so
here's your process.
You're not even going to. You might not even get the opt-in, which also takes the idea to, we didn't talk about it, but a best practice is with your vendors, know what their releases are including, have an opportunity to test that release in your environment and do a user testing of that release to make sure you're using it how it should be and that people know how to use it. And you don't know that it's not breaking one of your processes because they've just introduced a new feature that didn't work with your workflow. You've got to test that stuff. And Gen AI is no different. You're gonna get a button. You better be prepared to know how you're going to test that button and what you're going to do with it, because those are going to show up very, very soon.
Absolutely. First of all, I want to thank Patty, Diane, Jameson. Really appreciate it for coming and just sharing so much knowledge and wisdom with us. Thank you very, very much. I want to thank everybody, attendees, for being here. If there's any other questions.
Can I offer something? For those folks that would like to understand better what the support needs are around post-implementation support, we have a survey out from Integreon. And Colin, I think you can make it available to your listeners and to your subscribers. Basically, the survey will allow you to self-assess what your status is in post-implementation support. It will give you some recommendations based on your answers. It is completely anonymous. We collect no data as to who supplied it or anything unless you opt in for that information. And basically, but we would love to get some more data from all of you on what are your issues and problems. And then in return, we'll give you some suggestions. So hope you'll take advantage of that as an assessment for yourselves in looking at this issue.
Patty and Diane, is it okay to share your email addresses with the attendees in case they have any follow-up questions with you?
For sure, yes. Yeah.
Awesome.
Sure.
And then I will follow up with a copy of the recording just in case there's anything you kind of want to pull out from that. A huge thank you for your attendees. I know your time is very valuable. Thank you for spending it with us. And
yes.
We look forward to seeing you guys again. And thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.